There is a chance that future protests could be deemed illegal if organisers fail to comply with coronavirus restrictions. In a statement that appears to be a strengthening of the Berejiklian government's position, New South Wales Police Minister David Elliott said any protest in the future, irrespective of how honourable the cause, must comply with the current public health orders. If it does not, it's my expectation that police will not authorise the protest and it will be illegal. Sky News Political Editor Andrew Clennell joins me now from Canberra. As I said, Andrew, the fallout continues. We've got really angry businesses right around the country that they're angry, they're still subject to these heavy restrictions, and you've got this rancour, particularly inside the New South Wales government, that all of these things over the weekend and in the lead up to the weekend were mishandled. Where do you think it sits?
Well, I think police have the view there wasn't that much social distancing at that protest on the weekend. If there are no further protests, maybe it doesn't become an issue because we'll see restrictions come off. But if there are further protests, they're going to need to take some action in regards to it. They see what's happening as unsustainable while the public health orders occur. And you've seen initially some of the New South Wales ministers, like the Treasurer Dominic Perrottet and David Elliott, the Police Minister, a bit more hawkish than the Premier on this, as was perhaps Prime Minister Scott Morrison and Matthias Cormann, but Gladys Berejiklian came on board last Friday. So I think essentially you will see a situation where they'll be declared unlawful. There will be legislation in the state parliament in New South Wales if the protests continue, so they can be declared unlawful without a court overturning that. Police believe that alone would take 20,000 number down to 5,000. It'd be a lot more manageable. It'd still be a difficult situation because you can't just arrest 5,000 people, but essentially it would be a more manageable situation and perhaps a bit more social distancing going on. Interesting, Peter, that here in Canberra today there was no mention of this issue in the government party room. Almost seemed deliberate that no one wanted to raise this issue. But in the Labor Party room, Anthony Albanese in the caucus, the leader made quite an issue of it. He called Matthias Cormann's comments on Sunday agenda, as I understand, in regards to it, obnoxious. And he made the comment that if, except for the restrictions, all Labor members of caucus would no doubt like to attend the protest. So quite an interesting decision by Anthony Albanese there to make it a central issue of today's caucus discussion.
Yeah, just on that, it was reported yesterday, I think it might have been even today, Bill Shorten did not support the protesters marching. Now, maybe that's where the difference is.
Well, I think there is I mean, Anthony Albanese is entitled to his view and his sympathies, obviously, with the Aboriginal people on some of these issues. But there does seem to be a trend which is worrying some members of caucus, I think, that Scott Morrison really occupies the centre ground and has done a champion job politically of doing that. And Anthony Albanese continually goes to the left on a number of issues. And that might be on climate change, on this, on economic issues. So I think there are concerns there in the Labor camp in terms of whether that's a winnable position for a Labor leader. And I think perhaps we saw it again today.
Well, I think that Scott Morrison deliberately occupies the centre in order to force Anthony Albanese even further to the left to sort of reinvigorate the line that he is and always was and likely always will be a man of the left. I think that's all very deliberate in terms of political tactics. A number of MPs attended. We know in Victoria there was an Upper House MP and a Victorian Greens senator. Greg Hunt, the Health Minister, the Federal Health Minister, says that they should be at home and self-isolating.
This isn't about the cause, the most noble of causes and the most understandable. It's about the health protection of Australians, and our message was very clear, and individuals, particularly elected officials who breach the health advice, will have to explain why they breached that health advice.
Yeah, and so says the AMA. Do you think that's going to happen?
No, I don't think so. And to be perfectly frank, you're probably more likely to pick up COVID-19 in the Parliament with all the cases there than someone coming from one of those protests. I really think this is yet another argument to just lift restrictions and lift them as quickly as you can.
I agree.
Because it seems to me that there is no second wave coming unless we open the international borders. Now, I can see that happening, Peter, in a couple of years when we start to feel a bit safer. We want to market ourselves as a COVID-safe destination. We want international students in. That's where you might get a second wave. With these low number of cases and so many tests going on, I cannot see a second wave occurring in Australia at the moment, as long as those international borders are shut and the quarantining is occurring.
And the quarantining, I mean, they haven't even started that properly in the UK, I might add. They're still sending people home on a trust system, if you can believe it. That is the most important thing, the hotel-based quarantining. I just want to look at another issue quickly before we go. Apparently, a lot of local governments have wound back their climate change related projects because they want to prioritise spending on the pandemic. Melbourne City of Yarra Council, they're pulling back on a number of things, including the crazy policy of giving householders 4 bins for waste, not 2, 4, and all the bike paths that are coming everywhere in our cities. This is a bit of a silver lining, if there is one in this pandemic, surely. Well, I think governments of all persuasions are just going to be focused on one thing, and you hear Scott Morrison and Josh Frydenberg say it all the time: jobs, jobs, jobs. You know, Stephen Kennedy, the Treasury Secretary, told the COVID committee, Senate committee today there'd be 8% unemployment by September. By the end of the year, frankly, I'm expecting 10 at least. So, particularly with JobKeeper coming off. So every government's just going to be focused on that. Other issues are just going to have to fall by the wayside. Yeah, on the stuff that actually matters. Andrew Clennell, thanks for your time.